Привit! Dobre den! Howdy, everyone. Welcome to the Slava Heroyam podcast. I'm your host, Travis Hightower. This is the podcast that focuses on the individual stories and heroes of the Ukraine defense against the Russian terror attack on their nation. We cover everything from soldiers to civilians, from NATO to South America and beyond, who's helped the fight against Russian aggression. Today is May 25th, year of our Lord 2026, and it is Memorial Day. So this is a Memorial Day special where our heroes of the week will be American soldiers who have sadly given their lives in defense of Ukraine and in the name of liberty. But first, as always, we will talk about victims and remember them. Remember victims of the human safari. If you don't know what human safari is, please check out this QR code in the top left, and also go and visit this website right here. Human Safari describes the constant attacks, especially in the Kherson region, that Ukrainian civilians face, where they're being hunted by drones. Sometimes having munitions dropped on them, sometimes the drones with explosives fly directly at them, or their vehicles, or their homes. So let's sadly show a few victims. Now, May 18th, 19th, and 20th of this year saw the largest Shahed drone, ballistic missile, and human safari coordinated attack across Ukraine since the beginning of the war. Kyiv in particular was targeted very heavily, and we lost a lot of civilian life and a lot of injuries. Even though 97% of Russian munitions are shot down, a large part and thanks to Ukrainian drone interceptor technology and ingenuity in shooting down those munitions, along with Patriot missile support from the West. A lot does get through, and I can't cover all of the casualties that happen, but we cover just a few to give you an idea of the type of people that Ukraine is losing. This first young man is a university student in Dnipro University. His name is Dmytro Samolenko, and he was struck with a ballistic missile, only 18 years old, was hoping to go to college, probably avoid the conflict. He lives in the East and do something more for his country after the war, but Russia had other plans for him. This is 47-year-old mother and resident of the village of Alexiivka. She was killed by Russians who continue to fire on civilians in the Nikopol region. It's unclear at this time if human safari, artillery, or Shahed drone got her, but Nikopol is heavily targeted by all three. We lost another mother, Larissa, killed by a Russian missile in the town of Priluki. Larissa was killed by a Russian missile in the town of Priluki, May 19th, along with two other civilian men and a 15-year-old boy. It's those children under fire that I've been writing about in my column. If you appreciate what I'm doing on this Substack, please subscribe. If I get enough subscribers, I'll open up we've reached over the 100 mark. Thank you so much. But I'll be opening pretty soon a Buy Me a Coffee, and that will essentially pay for the computer program that allows me to do this podcast per month, and nothing more. I'm doing this to try to raise awareness of the individual persons and people that are affected in Ukraine. This is not to profit off of, and I would love to be able to tell their stories. But I am writing about the documentary in support of the documentary Children in the Fire. So please check out my Substack on travishightower.substack.com to get those stories. But to learn a 15-year-old was killed over the past week, and I don't even get to know his name yet. It just becomes even more potent. The stories of the young heroes that have survived and lived to tell the story. This is Elena Mischenko. She's another student and she was a student of psychology at the university in Kherson. Even though Kherson is heavily under attack by human safari, you still have college students. You still have people trying to go about their lives. And she is a human safari victim, hunted down by a drone. We want people to be able to go to Kherson University and pursue their future in peace. A town that used to have 400,000 people is now down to 60,000. And this was a determined student. She was not going to let Russia scare her away. And even though she's gone, her friends and family are not going to be scared away. Something Russia doesn't understand. But you can help them. And I'll tell you how by the end of this podcast. Russians also killed 59-year-old Sylvania and her husband. She is a resident of the Nikopol region. Nikopol also got hit really hard this past week. Her home was shelled by artillery. I talk a lot about human safari. We talk a lot about the Shahed drones and the missiles. But Russia has always done a burn out the civilians, destroy the towns with artillery. The only reason artillery is not more dangerous is because of the HIMARS that we gave them at the beginning of the war. And HIMARS are going to start running out soon. So Europe is going to have to has been picking up the slack on that. But all it takes is 3 Republican congressmen to stand up to Trump and say, we need to reinstitute the aid we were giving to Ukraine. And if you're worried about the money that we were giving to Ukraine, it is a fraction. I'm talking about 1 or 2% what we spent on Iran. To really understand that, you can message me. I can go over the numbers with you. But a few HIMARS from a garage sale might have kept this woman alive. A few more. Because what HIMARS does, it's an artillery missile system that keeps Russian artillery further back. And this last young lady is a warrior. I wanted to feature at least one Ukrainian warrior lost this week. Women in Ukraine have been fighting well as drone operators, snipers, and combat medics. Victoria Scoville was 21 years old. I don't know which of the 3 fighters she was, but likely a combat medic because Russia targets combat medics directly. So we mourn the loss of all those civilians. So now I want to talk about 5 heroes, American heroes, in honor of Memorial Day that have passed away during the fighting in Ukraine. And what you need to realize about each one of these heroes is whether you agree or not with helping Ukraine, that every war since the Civil War has been fought overseas. Americans. So when you have been thanking me for my service, when you've been thanking any veteran for their service, I know many of you are thinking, thank you for your service, for protecting my freedom. But in order to protect your freedom, the ideology, the thought process was that I am protecting the freedom of others. And many of you are not naive enough to not think that Vietnam, even the desert wars, that there weren't politicians using soldiers as pawns in some other political game besides defending your freedom. And you've been able to separate that and thank your veterans. But the veterans going to fighting for Ukraine have been doing so without thanks. And pause there. Okay. And the nice thing about doing these recordings is that I can edit out when people have called me. But I'll go ahead and leave that in because sometimes people do call. Anyway, these heroes that I'm about to introduce have fought and died thanklessly. There will likely never be a memorial wall for them. Even the Korean War is called the Forgotten War. There are at least 120 Americans, maybe more, who have died fighting in Ukraine. And there are 20 missing. And whenever you toast a POW, you toast with water. So please do. We will be toasting with water. Come here. We will be toasting them with water. Right now, Trump and the executive, they're politically unable to put troops on the ground in Iran. Fortunately, this conflict is very unpopular. And right now, it's very sketchy where the Senate is starting to stand up for the War Powers Act, which is good, but they can't put troops on the ground. And make no mistake, if by any means necessary, if they were able to hold on to power in the Senate and Congress through all the redistricting efforts and everything that you've seen, then you can be rest assured, if they have the numbers, they will put troops on the ground in Iran, because that's the only way you're going to open the strait. So, by the way, that the 120 killed in action, if I didn't say so, that's an estimate. But we know of 2 that were taken prisoner and returned, and they experienced the same prisoner hardships that Ukrainians face. But the 20 missing in action, if they were taken prisoner, there's no telling if they were returned or not. In fact, this first hero that I'm going to go over gave his life not wanting to be taken prisoner, because foreigners that are taken prisoner by Russia are promised to not have any rights. They're if not that Russia recognizes any of the Geneva Conventions, but they will classify you as a criminal, as a mercenary, and disappear you forever if you are captured. So foreign fighters are under no illusions that they should not be captured. And that plays into the story of this gentleman. I'm going to go ahead and remove the Heroyam Human Safari banner for now. This is Zachary Ford. He was one of 3 Americans given a dangerous mission to take out a bridge just outside of Pokrovsk in eastern Ukraine. It was one of those high-profile towns that Russia wanted to take, so they were trying to cut them off by cutting off a bridge. This was in late September 2025, and what you'll find a lot of these on a lot of right-wing news channels and those kind of controlled by Russian propaganda is they'll say, "Oh, Ukraine kept giving foreigners all the dangerous missions and all the missions that were basically suicide missions." Well, as we'll see, that's not true. And the ones who actually use foreigners like cannon fodder are Russia, in terms of North Korea. And those North Korean soldiers don't exactly have a choice in whether they come fight or not. That's another thing to remember. But I have several acquaintances fighting with Ukraine, and they speak of their Ukrainian brothers in arms as just that, brothers. And Zachary Ford is the only hero I can name. And Zachary Ford is the only hero I can name in this story. And we have to pause here. Okay, now I'm about to tell you a story of 3 Americans, and Zachary Ford is the only one I can list by his actual name. The family of his fallen compatriot, known as Gunther, wants him to only be known by his call sign. And the other surviving American, Redneck, is still fighting against Russia's unprovoked invasion. Now, Redneck is the reason we know this story, because he survived to tell CNN the account. And essentially, these 3 Americans were sent in to destroy this bridge, and then they were pinned down in a bunker or deep dug foxhole by drones and spotted. And they were 500 meters away from their target. So if you watch the documentary 2,000 Meters to Andreevka, you'll get an idea of what this fight must have been like, only just through the eyes of English-speaking Americans. Now, these Americans were fighting alongside Ukrainians. In fact, there was a Javelin anti-tank weapon unit and a grenade launcher that was giving them cover. And those guys died trying to stop Russian armor. So a unit of Javelin launchers, a lot of you have heard the Javelins, they've been very successful at taking out armor. And so I can imagine a situation where you had a Russian tank or armored personnel carrier approaching. They used the Javelin, destroyed the tank, stopped everything from being overrun, but then were themselves that would have revealed their position, and they got taken out by drones. So there were Ukrainians lost in this little battle as well. So you're 3 Americans, you're firing like crazy, your machine guns, Russians in front of you, and Redneck himself is the defense against drones. He's got a shotgun, which when you're a soldier, shotgun is your best defense against drones, especially the little FPV drones. And you get the feeling that Redneck was doing his best, but a drone hit the top of their bunker, and their bunker was protected by logs, and a log fell on Zachary Ford. And his injuries, he must have got his leg crushed or an arm crushed, because they required 2 tourniquets to keep him stable. And so the fight went on, and Gunther is killed by a drone trying to advance. and the Ukrainians withdrew. Gunther had gone with a couple of Ukrainians. They withdrew. They told Redneck his friend was dead in English. So you've already lost one American there. So a toast to Gunther. Remember you this Memorial Day. And then Redneck and Zachary Ford are left. By all this time, they're radioing that they probably should abort this mission. The Ukrainian command, and this is while the Javelin unit is still alive. They're wanting them to try and complete the mission, despite being spotted by drones, because the Ukrainian command is thinking they'll send in their own drones and take out the operators. That doesn't happen. They get completely pinned down. When they lose their Javelin support, they're really cut off. And Zachary Ford believes that they're probably going to be overrun and captured by Russians. And he tells Redneck to, if that is about to happen, to go ahead and kill him and then retreat. And Redneck refuses, kind of saying, no way, we're going to get out of this, man. And when Redneck goes back to the fight with his shotgun, Zachary Ford undoes his tourniquets because he's stubborn, but he's also maybe right, because everybody's defending this position to try to fight for a day. It's going to take a day before they can receive aid to get extracted. And so Zachary Ford says, no, this is it for me. He takes off his tourniquet and bleeds out and dies. But that does allow Redneck and the others to retreat and escape. And unfortunately, they have to leave his body behind. And then it becomes quite an ordeal to return American bodies and Ukrainian bodies from the front line. But greater love have known than this. And a man laid down his life for his friends. And that is exactly what Zachary Ford did in removing his tourniquet. So a legend to Zachary Ford and other heroes like him. So that happened in September 2025. An American giving his life for his fellow American that was left, but also the other Ukrainians who needed to retreat. All right, let me introduce another hero for this Memorial Day. This is Corey Nawrocki. He's 41. He was on fighting in Ukraine at the age of 41. He was fighting because he'd been made aware of the human safari and the toll that Russian terror was taking on civilians. Yeah, he was killed in the Bryansk region in October 2025 while trying to rescue an injured Ukrainian comrade. His body was captured and paraded around on social media by Russians, because that's what Russians do. Eventually his body, Russian orcs, and when I say orcs, the ones that have been really indoctrinated. Eventually his body and another American were returned with 800 Ukrainians. But unlike the 13 Americans that have been lost in Iran, who we also are remembering today, it's a very difficult process to return lost Americans home from Ukraine. Families not only endure, to go back to my camera here, families that endure lost loved ones fighting in Ukraine endure not only a long process to get their loved ones home to be buried. Many of them can never be returned. Sometimes it's just personal effects returned, but they're also trolled because the Russian bot farms will find out about it. And if you're on social media anywhere, those family members were relentlessly trolled by email and by online by Russians, kind of mocking the loss of their loved one. And that's just the type of mentality that you're dealing with here. And it's very, very sad and very hard for a family to go through. And yet those families are undeterred. We'll hear from another family in a similar situation in just a minute. But Corey fought 6 tours in Afghanistan, and then went to Ukraine, believing in the fight that needed to be fought there, and lost his life for a Ukrainian brother in arms. I don't know what shows the connection better between our nations, that it's not about any one nation, than the individual stories like that of giving your life for another, regardless of where they're from, because you know their cause is just. There's this fellow Texan, Cedric Ham. His story is very similar to Corey's in that he was trying to save the life of a fellow soldier. And most likely a young Ukrainian. There's no confirmation on his story, but apparently he succeeded in saving the life of that soldier at the cost of his own. And so I hope you're noticing a pattern here, that nationality does not differentiate the belief in that liberty and freedom is the right of, as Optimus Prime would say, of all sentient beings. And the only caveat to that Optimus Prime quote is that sometimes freedom and understanding whether or not you're free or not depends a lot on how well the truth can reach you and how cut off you are from the truth. And these soldiers are not cut off from the truth. They were there. They saw the truth. And if the truth were something like, there's actually Nazis here in Ukraine and Russia is right, they would have left. They would have left. These are soldiers that weren't like killed in their first battle. They were there for years. So something else to think about if anyone on the fence in my audience comes along. But Cedric's family, okay, so we should all be, I'm going to share with you one more veteran of the Iraq War. This is Jonathan Pebley. He is in an interview here with a big YouTube channel that covers military, and they tend to be right-wing because they believe in the ideology, but they're center-right. They're Republicans for the same reason I was a Republican, in the belief that with the power that we had developed since World War II and the Berlin Wall going down, that we had a responsibility to defend freedom against those nations that would come after it. And it was very easy to go from being disenfranchised by the Desert Wars, even though I don't want to get too far into it, but this guy fought in Iraq. And so here's a guy who got disenfranchised by those Desert Wars, that believed that he was going and fighting for the freedom of Iraqis. Like many U.S. soldiers, he started to feel used by politicians. He's quoted as saying, "My theologies changed, my politics changed in Iraq. I started to have a bit of guilt about my role in Iraq." He's quoted as saying, "I didn't believe that I should be there anymore because, he was ordered to do things that he disagreed with in Iraq." And there's a lot of stories like that have come out of it. There was a story of soldiers they were looking for insurgents who found the that were laying improvised explosive devices, and they found the wrong guys, and what they found were kids basically, and there was going to be an order to just shoot the insurgents that were captured, but in that case a U.S. captain stood up, and he now works for the YouTube channel Legal Eagle, but in that case they did the right thing in Iraq. And you have similar situations in Vietnam where you had the massacre of the entire village just for being suspected of having Viet Cong, and that caused a lot of Vietnam War protests. So you get into those situations where you're fighting a war you didn't expect, and it's not even from the top down. Sometimes racism and things like that come into play in your own units, and you have to find your moral center and stand up for it. And I'm sure that kind of thing is what Jonathan Pebley is talking about, where there was a lot of gray area. I didn't believe I shouldn't have been there, that we should have been there, and it's because of how long things went on. And I feel like in a karmic way, he says, that this kind of canceled that out. So I'm fighting, and he's referring to Ukraine at this point, I'm fighting a just cause in Ukraine, defending a people rather than encroaching on them. So I have arguments in favor of what we did in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not what this channel is about. But what it is about is, if you're worried about getting into the same type of quagmire in Ukraine, as you did in Afghanistan and Iraq. Even soldiers that became disenfranchised with Iraq and didn't think we should be there believe we should be in Ukraine. And as it turned out, Jonathan Pebley would give his life in Ukraine. He was team leader of the Delta Knights. That was a Foreign Legion squad made up of Americans, Poles, Brits, and natives of Scandinavian countries. So I'm imagining even Belarus, even Sweden, Scandinavian countries, natives of the Eastern Europe. They were given, once again, a difficult mission, but anytime a force in this war is trying to take the offensive, it's going to be a high risk, high reward. So if you wonder if the families of the mothers and fathers of these Americans fighting in Ukraine are mad that their kids went to fight in a foreign war, you should listen to Jonathan's father. And Jonathan's father said the Ukrainians have been getting pummeled by drones, bombs, and missile strikes, and it's mostly civilians, as I talk about often on this channel. Jonathan Pebley's father, Mark, served in the Air Force, and what's going on over there is evil and atrocious, and the rest of the world really needs to step up to the plate and stop what's really going on. Well said, Mark. So Jonathan was trying to stop what was going on in his own way, but this guy, like many of you out there, this is important for you to consider these things when you consider your misgivings about Ukraine. Is that people, if you can bet, if Jonathan didn't want to fight, didn't think at a certain point that the Iraq War was a valid war, but the Ukraine war was. You can bet a lot of other veterans feel that way too. We're drifting towards nationalism and isolationism and all that, but this is one of those cases that really is cut and dry. But you have to listen to the people that had boots on the ground, that were American. If for some reason you don't trust Ukrainians, you've got all these Foreign Legion soldiers who have been there, seen what the Ukrainians are up against. They've been in country, they've been in Kherson, they've seen the people hunted, and they know that it's a black and white, evil versus good situation. As black and white as you'll find. I want to share one more soldier killed early in the war. He was one of the first 10 Americans to die. And his story, I was looking for who was, originally I thought he was the very first one. Turned out he was in one of the first 10. But he was killed trying to liberate Kherson, who we talk about so much on this channel. And I just want to toast Trent Davis for his role in liberating Kherson, because Kherson is under constant mines and mining of the sky, but they are free of Russian occupation. And right now there is another town that is not free of Russian occupation on the other side of the river. It's called Oleshki. And a friend of the channel, Zarina Zabriskie, has been covering Oleshki, and we'll show you a clip of the situation there in just a moment. But this young man was only 21 years old. He left the American military only after 2 years, because this is where he thought his combat training could best be served, in Ukraine, protecting those people. And over his family's home now flies both the Ukrainian flag and the United States flag. So a toast with water to Trent, a toast with water to Trent Davis, Jonathan Pebley, Corey Naraki, Zachary Ford, Gunther, and 120 other Americans, and 20 who have not come back from Ukraine. So what's going on in Oleshki? If anyone remember the town of Bucha and the massacre there, you probably heard about a massacre, but what really went on in Bucha, and there's a movie about it from Ukraine. It's called Bucha. You can find it online to watch for free on YouTube. Is that the citizens there were held hostage. Bucha in particular had a lot of political families, people that worked in the government in Kyiv, because it's a suburb, and those families were going to be held for political hostages. And then if they tried to escape, they were killed, yada, yada, yada. So they had special ways of trying to get those people out. And Oleshki is much the same, except they're using the hostages in different ways. So Zarina interviewed a gentleman who managed to escape from Oleshki, and this can be found on X, the platform formerly known as Twitter.
Январь-февраль месяц, это, конечно, ужас, валишь как бы. В день, 2-3 гражданских трупа. Мины, дроны, тела валяются, лично видел. Таскала собака, да, труп. Старый морг, это типа такого подвала. И туда еще было пролетело. Холодильника, конечно, нема, что ж там будет работать, если нету света. Это все, у кого шо. То генератор, то солнечные панели, то его же никто же не включает на ночь. Газ пропал. Ну и дождь идет, бедра понаставляли. Ну, для туалета, по крайней мере. Также же канализации нету. То частный дом, у кого там печка была. В многоэтажках там, да, -2 в квартире. Информация скудная. Люди боятся, проверяется, телефон. С середины января никто не привозил ничего. Когда закончилось все, тут к соседу в подвал пошел. Дом сгоревший, раз нашли какую-то закат. В декабре нам в стенку пролетела мина. Вывалила на пол стены. Ну и собака, коты. Вот мы все в подвале. Я там приобрел дуечку. Тут заходит тебе в подвал человек с автоматом и в маске. Пьяный. Телефоны на проверку. Есть такие же неадекваты, которые там стреляют, нам тоже приходили. И дверь взломали, и прострелили. Я за год поменял 4 машины. Возил продукты, тоже вывозил от людей. Первую машину мне дрон разбил. Потом подорвался, был на мине. Потом 5. Попался на магнитке, машина сгорела. Не обстреливали. Вот так 2-3 выстрела сделают по городу и все. По прилету мины, по воронке можно определить, откуда она летит. Ну, она входит под углом немножко. Со стороны леса пролетает в стенку в эту, стенка сыпется. 100% этаж не с правого берега пролетела. Дроны, когда там тоже тренировались частенько, они там по домам. Дроны запускают, поднимают, пролетают, и в соседний дом прямо бух. Место. Что же вы делаете? Мы тренируемся. Правая сторона, она работает избирательно. Заходят дроны, они цели высматривают. Вот если они нашли цель где-то, где российские военные, туда лупят. А эти ж начинают бежать. Вот он бежит, забегает в дом, где живут люди. А они же им прикрываются. Для них невыгодно, чтобы людей не было. Они за людьми прячутся.
All right, so what you heard there is a lot of atrocities. Russians, basically shooting their way into people's basements where they're hiding, take their food. They have no power. If you try to escape, they're going to come after you. And this guy is trying to help people escape Oleshki. And then they try to blame the human safari that they're doing, the drone attacks, the artillery attacks on the town, which the Russians control. But they're trying to blow up some people and then blame it on the Ukrainians is essentially what they're doing with this town of Oleshki because it's on the other side of the river. And they want to validate their own human safari by saying, look, the Ukrainians are doing it too. Everyone's just as bad. War is evil. Everyone's terrible in war. Don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. That there's a lot of ways that war can go horrible, and there's a both sides situation to things. We just talked about some examples that Americans themselves have committed atrocities. The difference is we hold those people accountable. Those people in Afghanistan were held. When I mentioned the IED, those people are held accountable. In Vietnam, those people were held accountable for the most part. That can be debated still to this day whether it was enough of a punishment. But in this case, the Russians are, just be aware of them, they're constantly on false flag operations. And then when it does start to go south for them, they just use people as human shields. They run behind the house. They use all of the enemies of liberty tend to use civilians as human shields. And the way we respond to that has been hit or miss. Israel responded to that situation, the human shield situation, very poorly, for example. Ukraine does a much better job because instead of getting frustrated, Ukraine fights with truth, and then they innovate. They find ways to hit the enemy in places where their human shields don't matter. Like their oil reserves, for instance, like making the citizens of Moscow aware that they are not untouchable, and yet they are not directly attacked. They can go back to complaining about not having internet or whatever it is that really concerns them in Moscow. So, there's awareness is the most important thing for Alechki. There are plans for an operation to evacuate the city. But yeah, it's a tough situation, and everything has a solution if people stand up together. Like I said, 3 congressmen in the Congress switching over and standing up against Trump changes a lot. It gets us out of the Iran war, and it can also help stop the Ukraine war, which I will continue to advocate for a no-fly corridor. Why a no-fly corridor? Because you can reason, unlike a no-fly zone, which would cover all of Ukraine, that you're doing it for humanitarian reasons, and that would be the truth. But a no-fly corridor also forces Russia's hand. It forces Putin's hand. There would be a standoff, but inevitably, you get that corridor going, Putin will back down, and you'll show what a coward he is. And that would be the beginning of the end of the war. So, hashtag no-fly corridor. That's what we'll be pushing for on this channel. And one more thing that we do on this channel is we promote a charity of the week. And since it's Memorial Day and we have Americans fighting in Ukraine, I want to give you a way to help the international forces fighting in Ukraine. So we're going to share 50 states for Ukraine, which is on the carsforukraine.com website. 50 states for Ukraine I've shared before, but remember, this is a state-by-state initiative with a goal of reaching $1 million. And let's see where Texas is right now. You got North Carolina. Texas stands at $4,000. Come on, Texas, we can do better. But you've got it in the $1,000, these states, and each state sponsors a unit. It's a friendly competition to provide frontline units with battle-ready pickup trucks. And what do those pickup trucks do, really? They get supplies in, but they get the wounded out. And they get wounded out, which, if you hear one of those stories, you don't want Americans like... you don't want Americans like Zachary Ford being told again that they're going to have to wait a day for extraction. So they need these extraction forces, and you can prevent a guy from having to take his tourniquets off, so that he makes sure the rest of his unit lives and leaves him behind. And that's what you'll be donating to. 50 states for Ukraine. It's under campaigns. $115 covers truck camouflage painting. But a custom amount, even $5, every little bit helps. So I always tell people, take 1% of their percentage of what they would give to veterans. I'm asking this as a veteran. Take 1% of what you would give for your normal gift to veterans, to wounded warriors, that kind of campaign, and give it to the Americans fighting in Ukraine. They need your help. All of Ukraine needs your help, and you might just be helping to evacuate Alechki. That's our program for today. I am Travis Hightower, and as always, glory to those who support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. Slava Heroyam, or Slava Ukraini, and Heroyam Slava.